For 3 decades, organized crime held professional boxing in a grip of fear and corruption that would destroy careers and alter championship outcomes. This investigation draws from Senate hearings, FBI files, and federal court records to examine how the Mafia infiltrated and controlled the sport at its highest level. Stay with this account as it unfolds the documented evidence of what investigators discovered. What evidence did federal prosecutors assemble to prove that organized crime had systematically infiltrated championship boxing? And how did they finally dismantle the network? New York City, New York. January 1949. Evening. James Norris and Arthur Wirtz filed incorporation papers for the International Boxing Club of New York. The two men controlled Madison Square Garden Corporation. They now held promotional rights to the most valuable venue in professional boxing. Their new corporation would promote championship bouts at Madison Square Garden, Chicago Stadium, and Detroit Olympia. All three arenas belonged to the Norris family business empire. The IBC operated through exclusive contracts with champions. Fighters who wanted title shots had to sign with the organization. Norris served as president of 4 connected corporations that controlled the boxing landscape. According to later court documents, the IBC promoted championship bouts in the heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, and welterweight divisions. Behind the corporate structure stood Frankie Carbo. Born Paolo Giovanni Carbo in Agrigento, Sicily, on August 10, 1904, he arrived in America as a child. By age 11, authorities sent him to the New York State Reformatory for juvenile delinquents. His adult criminal record began accumulating in the 1920s. Charges included assault, grand larceny, and murder. In 1924, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the death of a taxi driver who refused protection payments. He served 20 months of a 2 to 4 year sentence. During Prohibition, Carbo worked as a hired gunman for bootlegger gangs. In 1931, police charged him with murdering Philadelphia mobster Michael Duffy in Atlantic City. Prosecutors dropped the case. Through the 1930s, Carbo operated as a soldier in Murder Incorporated under Louis Buchalter. Law enforcement records documented 17 arrests and 5 murder charges by the end of that decade. In 1939, investigators connected Carbo to the killing of informant Harry Greenberg in California. Police arrested him 2 years later. 2 Murder Incorporated members agreed to testify against him. Abe Relis and Ali Tannenbaum provided detailed statements. Before trial, Relis fell to his death from a 6th-floor window at the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island on November 12, 1941. He had been under constant police protection. Officials ruled the death a suicide. The case against Carbo collapsed. By the 1940s, Carbo had moved into boxing promotion. He worked alongside Frank Palermo, known as Blinky, a Philadelphia crime family member. Their organization included Eddie Coco, Jimmy Plumeri, Harry Siegel, and Felix Baciccio. Investigators later referred to this network as the Combination. They fixed high-profile matches through intimidation and financial control of fighter contracts. Carbo became known in boxing circles as the Czar of Boxing. The system functioned through ownership stakes in fighter contracts. Managers who wanted their boxers to receive title opportunities had to share control with Carbo and his associates. Those who refused faced threats or found their fighters denied championship matches regardless of their records. New York City. November 14, 1947. Jake LaMotta entered the ring at Madison Square Garden to face Billy Fox. LaMotta held a record of 49 wins, 3 losses, and 3 draws. Fox had won 36 consecutive fights, all by knockout. Bookmakers made LaMotta the favorite despite Fox's impressive streak. The fight lasted 4 rounds. LaMotta went down in the 4th. Referee Frank Fulham stopped the contest. LaMotta had been stopped once before in 78 professional fights. Sports writers immediately questioned the outcome. The New York State Athletic Commission opened an investigation. Commission officials suspended LaMotta's license. They found no concrete proof of a fix but cited suspicious circumstances. LaMotta's license remained suspended for 7 months. He received no title shot for 3 years despite his ranking as the number 1 contender. Washington, D.C. June 14, 1960. Morning. Senator Estes Kefauver convened hearings before the Senate Antitrust and Monopoly Subcommittee. The committee investigated organized crime's involvement in professional boxing. Jake LaMotta sat before the panel as a witness. Under oath, LaMotta admitted he deliberately lost the Fox fight. He stated that mob-connected figures told him losing would earn him a title shot. He confirmed he received no payment for throwing the match. The promise was access to a championship bout. LaMotta testified that he had to wait until 1949 before receiving his title opportunity. On June 16, 1949, he fought Marcel Cerdan in Detroit for the middleweight championship. LaMotta won by technical knockout in the 10th round when Cerdan's shoulder injury prevented him from continuing. The Kefauver hearings exposed the extent of organized crime's penetration into boxing. Carbo appeared before the committee. He invoked his Fifth Amendment rights 25 times. He answered no substantive questions about his boxing activities. Former champion Carmen Basilio provided detailed testimony. He stated that his managers, John DeJohn and Joseph Netro, paid Gabriel Genovese over $64,000 during the period when Basilio fought for and defended his welterweight and middleweight titles. Committee evidence showed Genovese served as a front man for Carbo. The hearings revealed that managers paid for title opportunities. Fighters had no direct involvement in these transactions. The payments went to mob-connected fixers who controlled access to championship matches through their influence over promoters and venue owners. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. May 30, 1961. Afternoon. A federal jury returned guilty verdicts against Frankie Carbo and Frank Palermo. The trial had lasted 3 months. The charges were conspiracy and extortion against welterweight champion Don Jordan. U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy personally participated in the prosecution. The case centered on efforts to force Jordan's manager, Jackie Leonard, to share control of the fighter's contract. According to trial testimony, Carbo and his associates demanded a percentage of Jordan's earnings. When Leonard refused, he received threats. Witnesses testified about phone calls warning Leonard he would be hurt if he did not cooperate. The evidence included recorded conversations and testimony from multiple witnesses who described the extortion scheme. The jury deliberated and found sufficient proof of conspiracy to violate federal law. Los Angeles, California. December 2, 1961. Morning. Federal Judge George Bolt sentenced Frankie Carbo to 25 years in federal prison. Frank Palermo received the same sentence. The judge cited the severity of their crimes and their long history of corrupting professional boxing. Carbo began serving his sentence at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. He later transferred to McNeil Island in Washington State and finally to the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. Palermo posted $100,000 bail and filed appeals. His legal challenges failed. He entered federal custody to begin his sentence. The convictions marked the first successful federal prosecution of boxing's top mob fixers. Earlier attempts had failed when witnesses recanted or died under suspicious circumstances. Robert Kennedy's involvement signaled the government's determination to break organized crime's control over the sport. The United States Supreme Court issued its decision in International Boxing Club v. United States. The court upheld a lower court ruling that the IBC violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. The decision confirmed that professional boxing fell under federal antitrust laws. The case had begun years earlier when the Justice Department filed suit against James Norris, Arthur Wirtz, Madison Square Garden Corporation, and the International Boxing Club. Prosecutors argued the defendants had monopolized championship boxing through exclusive contracts and control of major venues. Evidence presented at trial showed the IBC promoted championship bouts in multiple weight divisions. The organization held exclusive promotional agreements with champions in the heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, and welterweight classes. Fighters who refused to sign with the IBC found themselves unable to secure title matches. Federal Judge Sylvester Ryan found that Norris and Wirtz had monopolized championship boxing in violation of federal law. He ordered the IBC dissolved. The Supreme Court's 1959 decision upheld that order. Norris and Wirtz received 5 years to divest their interest in Madison Square Garden. The IBC dissolution removed the corporate structure Carbo had used to exert control. Without the centralized promotional organization, his ability to dictate championship matchups diminished. Individual promoters began operating independently rather than through one dominant entity. However, Carbo continued influencing boxing through direct ownership of fighter contracts. His network of managers maintained control over numerous boxers. The legal victory against the IBC did not immediately end mob involvement in the sport. Charles "Sonny" Liston walked out of the Missouri State Penitentiary on parole. He had served 2 years of a 5-year sentence for armed robbery. Prison officials released him into the custody of boxing handlers connected to John Vitale. Vitale operated as a St. Louis underworld figure with connections to organized crime families in other cities. Liston began his professional boxing career under Vitale's sponsorship. In 1958, Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo acquired majority ownership of Liston's contract. Vitale retained approximately 12% according to FBI reports. Carbo was incarcerated on Rikers Island at the time, serving a 2-year sentence for unlicensed matchmaking and undercover management of fighters. From prison, Carbo continued conducting boxing business. He communicated through associates on the outside. Liston fought 12 professional bouts under Carbo and Palermo's control. His record improved steadily. Boxing officials and sports writers recognized his skills but questioned his connections to organized crime. Sonny Liston knocked out Floyd Patterson in the first round at Comiskey Park. The official time was 2 minutes and 6 seconds. Liston became the heavyweight champion of the world. His mob connections generated controversy. Some boxing officials argued his title undermined the sport's credibility. President John F. Kennedy reportedly refused to have Liston visit the White House, a traditional honor for heavyweight champions. The administration considered Liston's organized crime connections a political liability. Despite the concerns, no evidence emerged that Liston's fights were fixed. He won on merit in the ring. The issue remained his handlers' criminal backgrounds and their ongoing FBI investigation. Police discovered Sonny Liston's body in his home at 2058 Ottawa Drive. His wife Geraldine had been traveling and returned to find him dead. The coroner estimated he had been deceased for approximately 1 week based on the state of decomposition. The Clark County coroner ruled the death resulted from lung congestion and heart failure with morphine as a contributing factor. Toxicology tests detected morphine in his system. However, the advanced decomposition limited the accuracy of the analysis. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes. Investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle. A small amount of heroin and drug paraphernalia were present in the house. Friends and associates stated Liston feared needles and never used intravenous drugs. This contradicted the physical evidence of needle marks. Several theories emerged regarding his death. Some investigators believed he died of a heroin overdose. Others suspected murder staged to appear as an overdose. No charges were filed. The case remained officially closed with natural causes as the determination. Author Sean Assail later investigated the circumstances in his book examining Liston's final years. He interviewed numerous sources and reviewed available evidence. His work raised questions about the official findings but presented no conclusive proof of murder. The truth of Liston's death remained disputed. New York City. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s. Various times. Sugar Ray Robinson operated his boxing career independent of mob control. Unlike many champions of the era, Robinson maintained ownership of his contract through his manager George Gainford. According to multiple sources, Robinson refused approaches from organized crime figures seeking to acquire interest in his earnings. The refusal came with consequences. Robinson did not receive a title shot until his 75th professional fight despite being the clear #1 contender in his division. The delay appeared connected to his unwillingness to work with mob-connected promoters. When Robinson finally fought for the welterweight championship on December 20, 1946, he defeated Tommy Bell by decision. He won the title without surrendering control of his career to criminal organizations. Robinson later won the middleweight championship 5 times and maintained his independence throughout his career. His success demonstrated that top-level boxing achievement remained possible without mob backing, though it required exceptional talent and determination. Robinson's example stood as an anomaly during an era when most champions had connections to organized crime figures. New York City. 1950s, various dates. The Kefauver Committee hearings produced testimony from numerous boxing figures. Managers described the system of payments required to secure title shots. Fighters explained how they learned their careers depended on cooperation with mob-connected handlers. Former middleweight champion Rocky Graziano testified about pressure he faced. He described receiving offers to throw fights. According to his testimony, he refused and continued his career. His manager Irving Cohen confirmed that refusing mob demands complicated their ability to secure certain matches. The hearings documented a pattern across multiple weight divisions. In the lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight and heavyweight classes, managers paid fees to fixers. These payments guaranteed their fighters would receive championship opportunities. Without paying, fighters faced delays or denials regardless of their rankings. Senator Kefauver stated publicly that the hearings revealed boxing had become thoroughly corrupted by organized crime. He called for federal legislation to regulate the sport. No such legislation passed. The hearings exposed the problem but produced limited immediate reform. The most significant impact came from increased FBI attention to boxing-related criminal activity. The federal convictions of Carbo and Palermo in 1961 resulted directly from investigative work that intensified after the Senate hearings. Frankie Carbo died of natural causes at age 72. He had been released from federal prison several years earlier due to declining health. His 25-year sentence had been reduced through parole. He spent his final years in Florida, no longer active in boxing. His death marked the end of an era. The control system he built had largely dissolved by the 1970s. Federal prosecution, IBC dissolution, and changing economic structures in boxing reduced the centralized power that enabled his operation. Federal investigators conducted Operation Shadow Boxing. The FBI operation targeted continuing organized crime influence in professional boxing. Agents used undercover operatives to document illegal activities. The investigation focused on promoter Don King's alleged connections to organized crime figures. According to FBI reports, agents documented meetings between King and individuals connected to Mafia families. The investigation examined whether organized crime maintained control over certain fighters and championship opportunities. Former mobster Michael Franzese later testified before Congress about the investigation. Franzese, who had been a captain in the Colombo crime family, provided information about mob involvement in boxing during the 1980s. His testimony described how criminal organizations continued seeking to influence high-level fights for gambling and financial advantages. No major prosecutions resulted from Operation Shadowboxing. The investigation demonstrated that organized crime maintained interest in boxing but lacked the systematic control exercised during Carbo's era. The sport had become more decentralized with multiple competing promoters and sanctioning bodies. The economic structure had changed. Television networks paid directly for broadcast rights. Multiple state athletic commissions regulated the sport rather than a single dominant body. These factors made comprehensive control more difficult than in previous decades. Boxing continued facing periodic allegations of corruption and mob influence. Federal authorities investigated suspicious betting patterns around certain fights. State athletic commissions reviewed questionable decisions and scoring. In 1992, Senator William Roth convened Senate hearings examining ongoing corruption in professional boxing. Testimony revealed continuing problems with biased judging, questionable medical clearances, and financial exploitation of fighters. Several witnesses described organized crime figures maintaining involvement in the sport. The hearings produced recommendations for federal boxing legislation. Congress passed the Professional Boxing Safety Act in 1996. The law established safety standards and required sanctioning organizations to provide objective fight rankings. It created oversight mechanisms but did not eliminate all corruption. Federal prosecutors continued pursuing boxing-related criminal cases. Investigations focused on illegal gambling, tax evasion, and contract manipulation. The cases involved individual promoters and managers rather than a centralized criminal organization controlling the entire sport. The Carbo era represented the peak of systematic organized crime control over championship boxing. Later mob involvement occurred on a smaller scale without the comprehensive infrastructure that enabled Carbo's operation. Washington, D.C. Various dates. Historical record. Congressional records documented the full scope of mob infiltration into boxing. Senate subcommittee reports detailed how organized crime families divided control over different weight divisions and geographic regions. The New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago families held primary influence through their control of major venues and fighters. The records showed payments flowing from managers to mob fixers. Financial documentation revealed tens of thousands of dollars in transactions connected to championship fights. Tax records and bank statements entered into evidence traced money from legitimate boxing revenues into the hands of convicted criminals. FBI surveillance logs recorded conversations between mob figures discussing fighter control and match outcomes. Wiretap evidence captured discussions about fixing fights and intimidating managers. This evidence, accumulated over years of investigation, provided the foundation for successful prosecutions. The historical record established several key facts. Frankie Carbo held significant influence over championship boxing from the 1940s through early 1960s. The International Boxing Club operated as a monopoly that violated federal antitrust laws. Numerous fighters had contracts controlled by mob-connected figures. Championship opportunities were bought and sold through a system of payments to criminal organizations. Federal prosecution successfully convicted Carbo and Palermo in 1961. The convictions led to 25-year prison sentences for both men. The Supreme Court dissolved the IBC in 1959. These legal actions disrupted but did not completely eliminate organized crime's involvement in professional boxing. Multiple fighters testified they threw fights or had their fights fixed by managers working with the mob. Jake LaMotta's admission regarding the Billy Fox fight provided specific documented evidence of match fixing. Carmen Basilio's testimony detailed the payment system that controlled title shot access. Some fighters, notably Sugar Ray Robinson, maintained independence by refusing mob involvement. These cases proved that success without criminal backing was possible but difficult. Most champions of the era had some connection to organized crime figures through their managers or promotional arrangements. The Sonny Liston case illustrated the complications of mob involvement. He fought under mob-connected management but won legitimate victories in the ring. His death in 1971 remained officially unexplained despite persistent theories of murder. No criminal charges resulted from the investigation into his death. By the 1970s, federal prosecution and structural changes in the sport had reduced centralized mob control. The system Carbo built dissolved following his imprisonment. Boxing continued facing corruption but never again experienced the comprehensive organized crime domination that characterized the Carbo era. The historical record closed on that chapter with Carbo's death in 1976, though questions about boxing's integrity persisted into subsequent decades.